As 2020 was an unprecedented year, our Best of series is doing something different this time. We have interviews with each of the ScottyMeLad crew members as they talk about what some of their favorite video games, TV series, and movies were for the year, as this is our favorites of 2020.
I love that we're doing faves of 2020. You know, it has been a very difficult year for everybody. And that does also include like entertainment and the way that, you know, we consume the entertainment and stuff. Something like faves is really cool because it's like, hey, what did you experience in 2020 that is like best for you?
Five.
My number 5 spot is Xenoblade Chronicles. Did actually come out this year on Switch.
Did it really? I didn't realize.
Yeah, dude. When I was writing all this stuff, I was like, wait, this was this year because I wanted to stream. I wanted this to be the first game I streamed. Like, I had a whole mission when I was trying to start streaming was like build my first PC and have it like ready by Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition's release date. And I managed to do it, but it was fun because like the way that I was streaming it felt like very episodic, feels like an anime. I love the story in it, love the way it plays. It's a great game for Switch, I think.
4.
My number 4 game is Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. It's a very good one. Scott can attest to that as well because of our great joint stream.
I'm enjoying the two games that you've picked so far. Not just because I enjoyed playing them, because they are good games, but hallmark to this year, I've thoroughly enjoyed watching you play both of those games. Like, they're some of my favorite games you've streamed.
Age of Calamity feels like the game that we were going to get with Breath of the Wild. Not that I didn't love Breath of the Wild. Like, Breath of the Wild is still my number 1 game of all time. You're watching these story trailers for Breath of the Wild and stuff, and all of them are a lot of those cutscenes are all like memories that you find in Breath of the Wild. That's not the game that you're getting. Age of Calamity is the story that you expected from Breath of the Wild. And what's really cool is that it's not, you know, it's a third-party game, and they managed to still make it feel Breath of the Wild brand is just really, really cool.
3.
A Short Hike.
Yeah.
I had to put that in there, dude. I had to put that in there. Man, I've streamed actually all of these games except for my number 1, so I'm really happy about that. I loved the art style in it, in the same sense that like Celeste, that game was like very good because it's like therapeutic. Like, it gives you a lot more than, you know, what like a video game would give you, which would be just like entertainment or like a story. And I just really enjoyed that stream. I think I had like a lot of people in there who were just chilling, and we were all just like really like, oh man, this is neat.
2.
My number 2 is Devolver Digital's Minit. Yeah, baby. That was such a good game.
Yeah, that was
so good.
I will have a link to that full playthrough in this video because it's brilliant. It's so cool.
Oh my god, it was so fun. And I think like just Minit in general is a really good video game. It might be one of the most perfect video games out there. It's just a game. Its roots in the, I guess, like adventure and like the Legend of Zelda type of stuff there. The story in it is very interesting, little world building that it does, and just the whole gameplay loop of it is really neat. There's a gameplay loop and there's a story in it, and they're both like tied together, and they're both like really, really fun.
1.
Again, that's why I gotta say I really like how you've decided to do this sort of best of year thing as faves, because it's a lot about the experience, like as like what I experienced like as my number 1s, and it finally came out. My number 1 video game of the year was Final Fantasy VII Remake. Out of all of these games, even my honorable mentions, like this was the best experience I had, because it came out in March, and for all of us, that's like it was basically a month into the quarantine. So I think like I was off work for like a good long month plus, and so I had all the time to play it. this part of the FF7 story that remake is telling is the part of the game that's one, my favorite, and two, like what I remember. FF7 for me was a big game in my childhood. A lot of my moods and favorites with like, you know, genres in music, and expectations out of like kind of stories in general come from my experience with FF7. You remember all these characters, you love all these characters, and you go back to the source material, and it's a lot of it is like built up from your imagination. Just getting to live in that world and just experience that the way I experienced it too. A lot of the stuff for my number one here is because it was my favorite. And I do think that it is a top game of the year.
Five.
It's actually The Expanse. I've talked about this a lot with Scott about how much I love Amazon Prime's Once Sci-Fi's show. It's just a really good show. It's super up my alley. It's incredible sci-fi. Like even George R.R. Martin, like his quote about it is on the headline of the book series that it's based on, where it's just like, man, there hasn't been a very good space opera like in a long time. This is it.
4.
Moving on, my number 4 is Steven Universe Future.
Yeah.
HBO Max, baby.
It's also on my
yes. Steven Universe is probably, like, the original one is probably one of the best like shows out there for kids and just in general. Very open-minded and all about compassion, all about empathy, all about all these very positive things that we should be doing for each other as people. And I think what's interesting is how Steven Universe, the original show, ends. They end up like making nice with a character who had been talked about throughout like most of the show as this terrible, scary villain, and it doesn't really make sense. And I think what's interesting is that Steven Universe Future, it gives the show a lot of finality. Every episode is about Steven dealing with change and like the passage of time on life, and like how people you love and like people that you don't like or whatever, or people who have changed like tend to go in different directions, and how like you deal with what's out of your control. And that's always been like one of my favorite tenets in like all kinds of like stories. And I just really like how like Rebecca Sugar and like the rest of their crew was like, you know, they had all this stuff happen. We're gonna give these characters their time to live their lives. Like we don't really want to go back and like see what they're doing. They deserve to be who they want to be too. And I think that was one of the best like messages you can give in anything, let alone like a kids show that's like meant for children growing up.
3.
Number 3 is a show that I don't know if you're aware of, but this was a show I found. It was one of the first webtoons, I think, that's gotten like an anime of some sort. But it's called Tower of God. It was a really cool anime in a style of animation. It had something to it that sort of differed from like your traditional anime or your traditional shonen or whatever. The premise is really, really cool. There is this tower that people can climb. You know, if you make it to the top, you are able to like make a wish or do whatever you want or something like that. And the story itself is about this girl named Rachel who wants only to see the sky, like only to go to the very top of the tower and see the real sky. And it's also about this boy Bomb who only wants Rachel. It's interesting, like motivations and stuff with like these characters are interesting. I'd say it's probably one of my favorite animes.
2.
My number 2 for TV was South Park, the pandemic special. That was just so good. That was a very, very much needed, didn't know I needed, because I think we were a little bit more than halfway through this year when that came out. Pandemic stuff, quarantine stuff must have been getting difficult for everybody. I feel like it wasn't until I saw the special where like being cooped up like this made me like kind of look around or see what I could see at least and be like, oh man, like people aren't taking this thing in like a certain way, they're not taking it seriously, or like they're taking some things like too seriously, or like, you know. And it was just like, you know, being very frustrated all the time because it didn't feel like we were on the same page about some stuff. And seeing the pandemic special was nice because it was like just seeing like the fact that how ridiculous the world has gotten or just like out of like control.
It's very standalone, and it's very cathartic for living in the year of hell 2020.
Yes, that's the final nail to it that I would put. I'm stealing your quote. It was an incredibly cathartic thing, and it helped a lot actually after I saw it, because it was like, cool, there's stuff to relate to here, and I'm glad that it's not just me.
1.
But couldn't have been my number one, because number one, DC's Harley Quinn. I've come to really, really just love animation stuff, because I don't know if it's out of spite or out of favoritism, but out of the whole, like, man, you can tell some incredible stories in animation. Harley Quinn is probably one of my favorite, like, DC properties ever, DC adaptations, that is, ever, because I think that it still gets to the heart of what DC Comics does best, which is like having this entire world, building upon it and using it all really, really well, and it commits to the choices that it makes. And if it doesn't commit, it explains why. Like, these characters really talk through this world, like really works through the things that happen. It's incredible, and it's a must watch if you've got HBO Max. So it's my number one for sure.
I have to agree. Harley Quinn is also on my list. Fantastic show. Harley, we join your crew any day.
God, yes, please. I would be, if you were hiring, if Harley Quinn from that universe was hiring a goon to drive the car and get shot, I'd sign up first.
Yeah.
Five.
Borat subsequent movie film. I had to put it in there. I honestly only put it at 5 though, because it was out of spite. I did really enjoy the movie way more than I thought I would, and I'm glad that it is what it is. You know, I think it was interesting that Borat sequel, it was already scheduled to like be a thing this year, but the pandemic like changed like so much of the direction of the movie and stuff, and it ended up being way more wholesome and like way more like progressive than you would expect out of Borat, especially if you're somebody who had seen the first one.
4.
Birds of Prey and the emancipation of one Harley Quinn. I just think it was cool. I think it was really, really well put together.
It's a good year for Harley Quinn.
Great year for Harley Quinn. Yeah, dang. That's my number 4 spot. Definitely had to be.
3.
This is definitely not something that came out in 2020. It was Studio Ghibli's Howl's Moving Castle. I think it was really good. I think it was really cool, really well put together and all that. Quintessential Studio Ghibli, like top of the Ghibli films. Really cool. It's just, I think the stuff that I enjoyed out of Howl's, I liked way better in Princess Mononoke.
2.
My number 2 movie of 2020. Thank you for... Wait, no, I'm the one who texted about this one, right? When we were talking about doing faves. And...
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. This one was my number 2. I think you had said like it came out in 2019, but we watched it in 2020, like right before the pandemic. It was one of the last movies we watched together. It was, I don't remember the director's name, but it was Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson's The Lighthouse.
Robert Eggers. He did The Witch, and then he did The Lighthouse.
And that was an experience. I have no idea how to explain it besides that.
Yeah.
Check it out if you're in for a very weird time.
1.
My number 1 movie, just with the rest of my number 1s. It's my number 1 because my experience with it was really good. We're talking about faves. I wouldn't put it critically at number 1, but I had a good experience with it, and I just think it was interesting. It's HBO Max's first original movie. And I think a pretty good Seth Rogen movie, An American Pickle. I just think it was just interesting, like reading about how Seth Rogen like wanted to like make something like very personal for him as a Jewish man. That's just a really fun one. The jokes aren't like over the top or fun or anything. It's a lot of it's very situational, but then it turns into a fun little competition, and where it goes from there is like very, very fun and interesting. Now also another wholesome one as well, I would say. As it's just my number 1. It was a good experience.
My favorite thing about American Pickle and you touched on it a little bit, is that I never knew where it was going. Initially, like the first half of the movie, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see where this is going. And then it changes. Not in a drastic way, it's just in a surprising way. And I was like,
Yes.
I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yes, yeah, it was interesting. You know, you're given the premise, and you're just like, oh man, this guy's gotta deal with modern life with his 100-year-old pickled great grandfather. Oh man, and then it just changes.